On a sunny afternoon, James Turner, a successful businessman, walked through the bustling streets of his city. He had built a comfortable life for himself. His company had grown steadily over the years, making him a wealthy man. But despite his success, something always seemed to be missing. There was a void inside him, something he couldn't quite name. James had never been someone who enjoyed the noise and crowds of the city, but today was different. He had taken a short break from his busy schedule, deciding to walk around the market just to clear his mind. As he strolled down the street, he couldn't help but notice how busy the market was. People were selling fresh vegetables, fruits, and all sorts of goods. There was laughter and chatter in the air, but it felt like he was looking at it all from a distance. As James walked past a small food stand, something caught his eye. He saw a young woman standing near a street corner. She was holding a baby in her arms, and her clothes were worn out. She looked tired and desperate. Her eyes darted from person to person, as though she was hoping someone would stop and offer help. But everyone just kept walking by, too busy with their own lives to notice her. James slowed down as he passed her. Something about her caught his attention. The baby in her arms, so small and fragile, seemed to cry softly. James' heart softened as he watched the woman trying to calm the child, her face filled with worry. She looked like she was struggling, not just with the baby, but with something much deeper. "Excuse me, sir," the woman called out, her voice soft but filled with urgency. "Could you please spare some money for my baby? I just need enough to buy some food for him." James stopped in his tracks. He wasn't the type to engage with strangers, especially on the street, but something in her voice made him hesitate. He turned to look at her properly. The woman appeared tired and worn, as if life had dealt her one blow after another. She didn't look like someone who would ask for help unless she truly needed it. James' mind raced as he thought about what to do. He didn't want to give her money for food without understanding her situation. But at the same time, he could see the desperation in her eyes, and he knew that at that moment, any help would make a difference. Without thinking too much, James reached into his wallet and pulled out a few bills. He walked over to her and handed her the money. "Here, take this. It should be enough for some food," he said gently. The woman's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, she just stared at him. Then her lips trembled, and she said, "Thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know how much this means to me." James nodded, offering a smile, though it felt a little awkward. He wasn't sure what to say next. The woman clutched the money tightly, her hand shaking slightly. She looked down at her baby, then back at James. Her eyes glistened with gratitude, but there was also a deep sadness in them, something he couldn't quite understand. "Good luck," James said, and with that, he turned to continue his walk. But something about the woman stayed with him, a feeling that would linger as he walked away. As he moved through the crowded streets, James couldn't shake the image of her tired eyes and the baby in her arms. He had done something kind, but he knew this wasn't just a simple exchange. There was something more to her story. The next morning, James woke up earlier than usual. His mind was heavy with thoughts of the woman he had met the day before. She had seemed so tired, so worn down by life. The image of her clutching her baby in one hand and the money in the other stuck with him. He wondered if the money he gave her had been enough. Was it really enough to buy food for her baby? Was she going to be okay? James couldn't get rid of the feeling that there was more to her story, a story he hadn't heard. He decided that he would go to the market again, just to see if he could find her and make sure she was all right. He dressed quickly, grabbed his jacket, and headed out the door. It wasn't like him to go out of his way for someone he barely knew, but something about the woman made him feel responsible. Maybe it was because he understood what it was like to struggle alone. He had built his fortune with hard work, but it had never been easy. Still, he had always had people to help him along the way. The woman, on the other hand, seemed to have no one. James arrived at the same market around the same time he had the day before. The crowds were as busy as ever, and vendors were shouting out their goods, trying to catch the attention of passing shoppers. But this time, as he walked through the market, he kept his eyes open for the woman. He wasn't sure what he expected, but he couldn't help but hope she'd be there. He wanted to make sure she was okay. As he passed the fruit stands, he caught sight of her. She was sitting on a bench nearby, the same baby in her arms. This time, however, she wasn't asking anyone for help. Instead, she was gently rocking her baby, humming a soft tune, her face relaxed, though still tired. It seemed like she had found a moment of peace. James hesitated for a moment before walking toward her. He didn't want to seem like he was intruding, but he couldn't ignore the urge to check in on her. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Excuse me," James said softly, standing a few feet away. The woman looked up at him with a surprised expression, but then her face softened when she recognized him. "Oh, it's you," she said with a faint smile. "Thank you again for helping me yesterday. I don't know how to thank you enough." James smiled back, though he felt a little uncomfortable. "I'm glad I could help. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Is everything okay?" The woman nodded, her smile a little brighter now. "Yes, thank you. I was able to buy some food for my baby. He's eating well now. It's just, life is hard, you know." She paused, looking down at her baby, her expression turning serious again. "But we're making it." James felt a wave of relief wash over him. It seemed like she was managing, but there was something in her voice that told him her struggles were far from over. She wasn't just battling poverty. There was something deeper in her words, something he couldn't quite place. "I'm glad to hear that," James replied. "I'm just glad you're both okay." The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then, almost shyly, she spoke again. "You know, not a lot of people would stop to help someone like me. I didn't expect it. But you did, and that means a lot." James was quiet for a moment, his gaze falling to the baby in her arms. He felt a warmth spread through him. There was something about her honesty, her vulnerability, that moved him in a way he didn't fully understand. "You don't need to thank me," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm just glad I could do something, anything, to help. If you ever need anything again, don't hesitate to ask." The woman smiled again, this time with a sense of peace he hadn't seen before. "Thank you, really. I don't have much to offer, but I'll never forget this." James nodded, feeling something stir within him. It wasn't just about the money, or even about the food. It was about the way the woman looked at him, like he had made a difference in her life, even if it was just for a moment. And in that moment, he realized that perhaps the most important thing was just showing up, offering kindness when it was needed most. With a final nod, James turned to leave. As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. The following day, after his brief visit to the market, James found himself unable to focus on work. His mind kept returning to the woman and her baby. He couldn't shake the image of them from his thoughts. Despite the kindness he had shown, he still wondered about the deeper challenges they might be facing. Was she truly doing okay? Was she finding a way to make ends meet, or was she still struggling? To clear his mind, James decided to take a walk in the cemetery where he often visited his late wife's grave. He had found peace there before. The quiet and calm of the place always helped him reflect. It was a place where he could think clearly, away from the noise of the world. As he entered the cemetery, he walked slowly down the cobbled paths, past rows of gravestones. The soft chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves filled the air, creating a peaceful atmosphere. He stopped by his wife's grave, standing still for a moment as he gazed at the stone. His wife had passed away several years ago, and though he had built a successful life since then, the pain of her loss still lingered. He often came here to talk to her in his thoughts, as though hoping she could still hear him. Today, however, something felt different. As he stood there, lost in thought, he noticed a figure in the distance. A woman stood near a cluster of graves, her back turned to him. For a brief second, James thought he saw the same woman from the market, the one he had helped with the money for her baby. Curiosity drew him toward her, and as he got closer, his heart skipped a beat. It was her, the same young woman from the market. She was standing alone, staring at one of the gravestones, her expression unreadable. Her baby was not with her this time. James hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should approach her. It was strange to see her here, in a place where he had always come to mourn his wife. What was she doing here? Did she have someone buried here too? With a deep breath, James walked over to her. As he got closer, the woman turned around. Her face softened when she recognized him. "Oh, it's you again," she said, her voice gentle but filled with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here," James replied. "What brings you to the cemetery?" The woman hesitated, looking at the gravestones around her. Then she spoke, her voice quiet. "I come here sometimes. It's peaceful here. I guess I needed to be somewhere quiet today." She paused for a moment, then added, "I don't really have anywhere else to go. Life is hard sometimes." James looked at her closely. There was a sadness in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before, even when they had spoken at the market. She didn't just seem tired. She seemed lost in a way, like she was searching for something that she couldn't find. "Is everything okay?" James asked, feeling a sense of concern. The woman nodded slowly but didn't meet his gaze. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like things are never going to get better. My baby is my world, but there are days when I don't know how to keep going." James felt a pang of sympathy in his chest. He had seen people face struggles before, but hearing it from someone like her, someone so young, someone with so much at stake, hit him harder than he expected. "I understand," he said softly. "It's hard. Life doesn't always make sense, but you're not alone, you know. You don't have to face it all by yourself." The woman looked up at him then, and for the first time, there was a spark of something in her eyes. It wasn't hope yet, but it was something close. She smiled faintly, as if she appreciated the kindness in his words. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I needed to hear that." They stood there for a few moments in silence, both lost in their thoughts. For James, it felt like a strange moment of connection, something he didn't expect. He had given her money, but this felt different. This felt like something deeper. As the wind rustled through the trees, James knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to forget about this woman. He couldn't. There was something about her, something in her story, that kept him coming back. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves as James and the woman stood together in the cemetery. Neither of them spoke for a few moments, both lost in their own thoughts. James found himself thinking about the things she had said. The weight of her words lingered in his mind. Life was hard for her, and it wasn't just about money. It was about survival, about taking care of a baby on her own, and about the loneliness she must have felt. It was clear that, despite the small kindness he had shown her, there was so much more she was carrying on her shoulders. James had never expected to meet someone like her in a place like this. He came to the cemetery to remember his wife, to reflect on his own life. But standing here now, next to this woman, he realized something. They were both grieving in different ways. She had lost her partner and was fighting to keep her child safe, while he had lost his wife, his partner in life. The grief was different, but in some ways, it felt the same. For a moment, the woman looked at the gravestones around them, her eyes softening. "I come here whenever I need to be alone," she said quietly. "Sometimes it's just hard to keep moving forward. I've lost so much, and now I'm trying to figure out how to move on. I know I need to be strong for my baby, but sometimes it feels impossible." James listened carefully. There was something so honest in her voice, something raw and vulnerable. He could see it in the way she spoke about her struggles and the way she looked at the world. She wasn't asking for pity. She was simply speaking the truth of her life. And in that moment, James understood her in a way he hadn't before. "I can't pretend to know what you're going through," James said after a pause. "But I do know what it's like to feel lost. I think sometimes we all need a little help to find our way again. I think maybe that's why we're here, to help each other." The woman turned to face him, her expression softening. "You're kind to say that," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "But I don't think I deserve help. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to make sure my baby doesn't go hungry." James felt a surge of empathy. She was so focused on doing what she could for her baby, but he could see the toll it was taking on her. She wasn't just a mother. She was a woman who had been knocked down time and time again, yet she kept standing. It wasn't easy, but she kept fighting. "You deserve help," James said firmly. "Everyone deserves a little help when they're struggling. You don't have to go through this alone." There was a long pause, and then the woman smiled faintly. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough to show that she appreciated his words. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." For a few moments, they just stood there in silence, the quiet of the cemetery surrounding them. James looked at her, his thoughts racing. He didn't know what he could do to help her beyond what he had already done, but he felt a strong urge to do more. She was strong, yes, but even the strongest people needed someone to lean on. "I want to help," James said, almost without thinking. "I don't know how, but I want to. If there's anything I can do." The woman shook her head, a small laugh escaping her lips. "You've already done so much, more than I ever expected." James nodded, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know where this strange connection would lead, but he knew he couldn't just walk away. There was something about her, something that made him want to help her find a way forward. They stood there for a while longer, both reflecting on the unexpected bond they had formed in such a short time. For James, this encounter had changed something inside him. It wasn't just about giving money or charity. It was about something deeper: understanding, connection, and the willingness to help when someone truly needed it. The days passed, but James couldn't stop thinking about the woman he had met in the cemetery. Her words had stayed with him long after they had parted ways. She had been so open with him, and yet there was still so much he didn't know about her. He felt a strong urge to help her, to do something more than just offer a little money. But he also knew that giving her more without truly understanding her situation wouldn't do much. That afternoon, James found himself back at the cemetery, walking along the familiar paths. He didn't expect to find her there, but something inside him pushed him to return. Maybe it was his curiosity, or maybe it was his desire to help. Either way, he hoped that this time he could learn more about her, about what had brought her to this place in her life. As he walked past the gravestones, he saw her again. She was sitting on a bench, her baby resting in her lap. The child looked calm, but the woman's face was filled with concern, as though the weight of the world was still on her shoulders. She looked up when she saw him approaching, and for a moment, they both paused, unsure of what to say. "Hello," James said, his voice soft but warm. "I didn't expect to see you here again." The woman gave a faint smile and nodded. "I come here when I need a moment to think," she said. "It's quiet here, and sometimes it's the only place I can get a little peace." James sat down beside her on the bench, keeping a respectful distance. "I understand," he said. "It's peaceful here. I come sometimes too, just to clear my mind." For a few moments, they sat in silence, the only sound being the soft rustling of the trees in the wind. James could feel the tension in the air, like there was something unsaid between them. Finally, he broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said last time," he began. "You told me you were struggling. I wanted to ask, if you're comfortable with it. That is, what happened to you? How did things get so difficult?" The woman's eyes shifted slightly, as though she wasn't sure how much she wanted to reveal. After a long pause, she looked down at her baby and took a deep breath. "It's not an easy story," she said quietly, "but I'll tell you, since you've been kind to me." James listened intently, his heart aching as she spoke. "I was married once," she began, her voice steady but filled with pain. "My husband and I were in love. We had big dreams, but after our baby was born, things started to change. He didn't want to be a father. He couldn't handle the responsibility, and he left me. I was alone with a newborn and no way to support myself. I had no family to turn to. It felt like everything was falling apart, like I was losing everything." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "I did what I had to do to survive. I found work where I could, but it was never enough. I've been trying to keep my baby safe and fed, but it's hard. It's hard not to feel like I failed." James felt a lump form in his throat as he listened. He hadn't known the full extent of her pain. He had seen her struggle on the surface, but hearing her story now made him realize just how much she had been through. The woman was stronger than he had ever imagined. She had been fighting every day just to give her baby a chance at a better life. "You haven't failed," James said softly. "You're doing your best, and that's all anyone can do." The woman looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. "It means so much to hear that. I've been so lost, but hearing someone say that, it makes me feel like maybe I'm not completely alone." James nodded, understanding her more than ever. In that moment, he knew he couldn't just walk away. He had to do something to help her, not just with money, but in a way that could make a real difference. But he didn't know what that was yet. All he knew was that her story had touched him in a way he couldn't ignore, and he was determined to find a way to make her life just a little easier. James left the cemetery that day with a heavy heart. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman's story. She had been through so much: betrayal, loneliness, and the struggle to survive. Her words echoed in his mind as he walked back to his car. He had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, like giving someone money, could lead to such an emotional connection. He couldn't help but feel guilty for taking his own life for granted. Sure, he had worked hard for his success, but he had never known real hardship like she had. He had always had the luxury of choice. He could walk into any store and buy what he needed, never worrying about where his next meal would come from. But she didn't have that luxury. She was constantly struggling, fighting just to survive. As he drove back to his office, James reflected on his own life. He had built his wealth from nothing, but the cost had been high. He had sacrificed relationships, his time, and even his own happiness in the pursuit of success. He had been so focused on his career that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. He had never allowed himself to grieve the loss of his wife properly. Instead, he had thrown himself into work, thinking that the distractions would ease the pain. But they hadn't. They never did. Now, after meeting this woman, he realized how much he had missed by isolating himself. Her story had opened his eyes to his own failures, not just in terms of his business, but in how he had chosen to live his life. He had been so focused on the idea of success that he had neglected the things that really made life worth living: compassion, connection, and love. That evening, as he sat in his office, James found himself questioning everything. He had everything that most people could ever want: money, status, security, but it felt empty. He didn't have a family to share it with. He didn't have close friends who understood him. And most importantly, he didn't have someone to love. His thoughts drifted back to the woman and her baby. He didn't know her well, but there was something about her strength and resilience that had left a lasting impact on him. He wanted to help her, not just with money, but in a way that would truly make a difference in her life. But how? What could he possibly do that would be enough? James thought back to the time when his wife was alive. He had been a different person then, more open, more caring. He had made time for the people who mattered. But after her death, he had shut himself off from the world. He had buried himself in his work and used his wealth as a shield to keep others at a distance. He had convinced himself that money and success would fill the emptiness, but it hadn't worked. As the evening wore on, James made a decision. He wasn't going to let this woman and her child slip away from his life. He wasn't going to walk away and pretend that everything was fine. He would find a way to help her, not because he felt sorry for her, but because he genuinely cared. He knew that he couldn't fix all of her problems, but maybe, just maybe, he could make life a little easier for her. It was time for him to stop hiding behind his wealth and start living a life that truly meant something. The next day, he made plans to meet her again. He didn't know what he would say or how he could help, but one thing was clear. He was no longer willing to stand on the sidelines of his own life. He was ready to take action. The next morning, James woke up with a sense of purpose. After days of thinking about the woman he had met in the cemetery, he knew what he had to do. He had spent so much of his life focused on success and money, but he now understood that true happiness didn't come from wealth. It came from helping others and making real connections. He had been blessed with so much in his life, and yet he had never truly allowed himself to enjoy it. Instead of hiding behind his work, he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to help this woman, not just because she was struggling, but because he believed she deserved a better life. One that was filled with hope, peace, and opportunities. James spent the morning thinking about how he could help her. It wasn't just about giving her more money, though that would help in the short term. It was about offering her something that could change her life. He couldn't give her a perfect life, but he could give her the tools to build a better future. After much thought, he decided he would reach out to her again. He knew she wasn't the type to accept charity without reason, so he didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. He needed to approach this carefully. He wanted her to see that he genuinely cared, not out of pity, but because he respected her strength and determination. James drove to the cemetery, a place that had become meaningful to both of them. He knew she often came there to find peace, and he hoped she would be there again today. As he parked his car, he took a deep breath. He felt nervous, but he also felt a sense of excitement. This was a turning point for him, a chance to do something real and meaningful. When he arrived at the bench where he had last seen her, he was relieved to find her there. She was sitting with her baby, quietly rocking him back and forth. She looked up when she saw him, and a small smile appeared on her face. "Hello," James greeted her softly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "No, not at all," she replied with a warm smile. "I come here to think, but it's nice to see a friendly face." James sat down beside her on the bench, his heart racing as he gathered his thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot about you and your situation," he began. "I know things have been tough, and I want to help you, but not just with money. I want to help you get back on your feet, to give you the support you need to build a better future for you and your baby." The woman looked at him, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she said quietly. "You've already done so much for me. I can't ask for more." James shook his head. "I'm not offering you more money. I'm offering you a chance. I know people who can help you find stable work, a safe place to live, and the resources you need to take care of your baby. You're strong, and I believe you can turn things around, but I want to be here to help you do that." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes, and for a moment, she seemed lost for words. James wasn't sure if he had said the right thing, but he felt like it was the truth. He had to help her in a way that would allow her to stand on her own. You really want to help?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James nodded. "Yes. You don't deserve to go through this alone. I want to give you the opportunity to live a life where you don't have to struggle every day." The woman stared at him for a moment, taking in his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. No one has ever believed in me like this before." James smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me. I just want you to know that you don't have to face this alone. You deserve better, and I'm going to help you get there." For the first time since he had met her, the woman looked at him with a sense of hope. The weight of her worries didn't disappear, but for the first time in a long time, she believed that things could get better. The days that followed were filled with change, both for James and the woman he had come to care for. After their conversation in the cemetery, James wasted no time in following through on his promise. He reached out to his contacts and found a community center that could help the woman with job training and childcare. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a start, a chance for her to build a new life for herself and her baby. When James returned to the cemetery a few days later to tell her about the resources available, he wasn't sure what to expect. Would she be hesitant? Would she doubt him, like so many others had? But when he saw her sitting on the same bench, her baby asleep in her arms, her face was different. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Hello," James greeted her, walking toward her with a sense of anticipation. She looked up and smiled. "Hi. I wasn't sure if you'd come back. I thought maybe you were just being kind in the moment." Her voice was soft, but there was something more hopeful about it now. James smiled back, feeling a warmth inside. "I meant every word I said. I haven't forgotten you. In fact, I've been working on something that might help." Her eyebrows raised slightly, and she looked at him with interest. "What do you mean?" James took a seat beside her, feeling nervous but also excited. "I reached out to some people I know, and there's a community center nearby that can help you. They offer job training, housing assistance, and even childcare for people in your situation. It's a place where you can get the support you need to start over, to build something better for yourself and your baby." The woman's eyes widened, and for a moment, she was silent. James wasn't sure if she was overwhelmed or unsure of how to react. He continued, trying to reassure her. "You don't have to take the offer if you don't want to, but I really think it could make a difference. You deserve a chance to live without constantly worrying about where your next meal will come from or if you'll have enough to get by. I believe in you, and I know you can do this." Tears started to fill her eyes as she looked down at her baby. She blinked, trying to hold them back, but a small sob escaped. I don't know what to say. No one has ever offered me something like this. I always thought I had to do it all alone, but you've shown me that there's more out there. Maybe I can do this." James reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help, and so are the people at the center. You've already proven to me how strong you are, and I know you can take this opportunity and run with it. You deserve a future where you're not struggling just to survive." The woman smiled through her tears, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you, James. I don't know what I would have done without you. You've given me something I didn't even think was possible. A way out." James felt a sense of peace settle over him. Helping her had changed something inside him, too. He had spent so many years chasing after things that didn't really matter. But now, helping her had given him a new sense of purpose. It wasn't about wealth or success. It was about making a real difference in someone else's life. "I'm just glad I could help," James said softly. "You're the one who's going to make it happen. I believe in you, and I know you'll do great things." The woman nodded, wiping her tears away. "I'll try my best. I'll do it for my baby." James smiled, watching as she stood up, holding her baby in her arms. "That's all anyone can ask for. You've already done more than enough just by caring. Now it's your time to shine." As she walked away, James watched her with a sense of pride and hope. This was just the beginning of her new journey, and he was glad to have been a part of it. Weeks passed, and the changes in the woman's life were nothing short of remarkable. With the support James had helped provide, she had moved into a small apartment close to the community center. She had started attending job training classes, learning new skills that would help her find stable work. More importantly, she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of hope in her eyes. James had continued to check in on her from time to time. Every time he visited, he saw the progress she was making. She was more confident, more at ease with herself. Her baby, once a constant source of worry, now had a stable home and a mother who was able to give him the love and care he deserved. One afternoon, James stopped by the apartment to see how things were going. He knocked on the door, and when the woman opened it, She greeted him with a wide smile. "Hi, James." "Come in," she said warmly. "I'm so glad you stopped by." James stepped inside, looking around at the modest but cozy apartment. It was small, but it felt like a home. There were toys scattered on the floor, and the walls were decorated with a few colorful pictures. It was clear that she had worked hard to make the place feel welcoming for her baby. "This place looks great," James said, smiling as he took in the cozy atmosphere. "Thank you," she replied, her voice filled with pride. "It's not much, but it's ours. It's a fresh start, and it feels good to know I don't have to worry about where we'll sleep tonight." James nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He had watched her journey from a place of fear and uncertainty to this moment of stability. It wasn't easy, and it wouldn't be perfect, but she had done it. She had found a way to build a better life for herself and her baby. "I'm so proud of you," James said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "You've worked hard, and it's paying off." The woman's face softened, and she looked down at her baby, who was happily playing with a toy on the floor. "I couldn't have done it without your help," she said quietly. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me the chance to change everything. And now, I'm just so grateful." James felt a lump in his throat. He had helped, yes, but it was her strength, her determination, that had made all the difference. She had taken the opportunity and run with it, doing what she needed to do to create a better future for her child. "You did all the hard work," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just helped you see that you could do it. You've proven to yourself that you're capable of so much more than you thought." She smiled and wiped a tear from her eye. "I never thought I'd be here. But now, I know I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes next." James smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. He was glad that he could help, but more than that, he was glad that she had found her strength. This wasn't just about one person helping another. It was about two people coming together to make a positive change in the world. And that made all the difference. As they sat and talked, sharing stories and laughter, James realized something. He had learned just as much from her as she had from him. She had taught him the power of kindness, the importance of community, and the strength of the human spirit. He had spent so much time focused on his own success, but helping someone else had given him a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. Before he left, the woman handed him a small gift, something she had made herself. It was a hand-painted picture frame with a simple message: "Thank you for believing in me." James took the gift in his hands, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "You've already given me more than I could ever ask for," he said. As he walked out the door, he looked back one last time. The woman and her baby were on their way to a brighter future, and James knew that he had played a part in helping them get there. It wasn't just about giving money or resources. It was about giving someone the chance to believe in themselves again. And that was the greatest gift of all.